Alright, today I'll take apart the front diff and we'll see what is causing the issues in the front end. Hopefully there's not too much damage and it's just bearings, but we'll see once we get it apart. I have my 1/2-inch socket on my driver, and here we go. These two I had to loosen off by hand first a little bit. I'll remove the 4 bolts from the pinion side. Just lay all those aside for now. Alright, see if we can get the pinion in though. Get that shoved there. Go. That part was easy. Wow. What a mess. Pretty rough. Fluid is more mud, I think, than anything else. See if we can break the top free. I just gave it a couple of very light taps here to separate it a little bit. Let's see if we can take it apart. There is a rubber gasket there. Oh yeah, it's just caught on the seal. That's okay. Just gotta be careful taking it apart. Try not to mar or damage any of the aluminum housing. And there we go. Wow, what a mess. Holy smokes. Right here. Let's put that little plate back on. I'll have to look at that a bit further. And then of course we got the, I believe they call this the helix, and that's seized in there. Looks like it's all full of mud. I don't see any damaged teeth. I will take out that cage. Oh boy. That looks like mud and grease. Or mud and more mud. Gosh. So that'll all have to be taken apart and cleaned. And I also had to check that case to make sure it's not cracked. As for now, I'll just put these all right here. Because I'll have to inspect that roll cage and inspect all these bearings. Let's continue pulling it out. You can see all the mud and everything caked in here, so we definitely have bad seals. Alright, I'll show all these parts now in a second once I get it all apart. Wow. Clean all that up before I even take it apart in case there's any small parts I won't see. Now we got the pinion here. Check to see if there's any teeth broken. There doesn't appear to be, which is good. Of course, we have all this bearing here on the other side, and that's really super rough. The water coming out of this, so the seals are definitely shot. So it does look rebuildable. I'm going to get it all cleaned up first in case we run into more issues, because I know that this little cage is also prone to cracks and all that stuff, so I want to really inspect this well to make sure that there's no cracks but it's super dirty right now, so I got to deal with that first. And of course, get all of these little bearing pieces all cleaned up and inspect it, see if there's any flat edges or roughness or whatever in them. Get the unit apart so I can inspect the armature plate. Alright, so disassembly of the front diff so far hasn't been too difficult. A few sticky pieces that require some a bit of brute force and ignorance, but nothing too drastic. It is aluminum, so you gotta take your time. You can see there's the O-ring gasket all the way around. That's in really good shape, actually. This thing just needs a really good cleanup so we can do a really good inspection. You can see the cage here. Oh my goodness, that's mud. So it's very obvious that the seal has been gone in this for a very long time. And this here is the case with the pinion in it. The bearings are in terrible shape, but the pinion seems to be okay. So like I say, once I get it out and cleaned up, we'll do a full inspection on it. So these are our little clips. They do come out. You just pry up a little bit from the inside, get in there and just pull up a little bit, and you can actually remove them. So the clip here, we should be able to just pry it. You can see it's coming off there. And I don't want to lose it, so I'm just going to try to be careful. But anyway, they just come off, so we're going to remove all of those and get those cleaned up, and then I'm going to clean up the cage. So there it is, pops out just like that. Plate where the pinion comes out through for connecting to the front prop shaft. So I just wiped it down a little bit. There is a rubber gasket that's around the outside here. That looks like it's still in really good shape. I think the damage from the mud and water infiltration came because the bearings were so bad. Even though the seal doesn't look terrible, of course it's going to be part of the kit, so all of the seals and bearings are going to be replaced. At this point, unless I find something that's broken, once I get deeper, and we might end up having to scrap the unit. But as of right now, it doesn't really look too bad. So that seal is good. Make sure you check that when you get it out, because if it's pinched or squat or damaged or whatever, that's a spot for either water to leak in or oil to leak out. So that's the one I'm talking about right here, all the way around. There's the bearing. And there's a needle bearing up here as well, which seems to be pretty much non-existent. It's caked in mud and is bent and everything else. And I don't think the needles worked, probably because the thing was so dirty. It just got full of mud and ground itself down to nothing. So that's part of the kit as well, so that got to be replaced. But this is like, yeah, that's not good. So that got to be replaced. There's a clip here that holds in this plate. So we got to remove that clip, get this plate out. Then there's more components underneath, and we'll dig into that. All right, so this little snap ring that's keeping all this, the armature plate and that in place. There's a little groove here, and you can stick your screwdriver in there. Right there's a little groove. You just pry out on it with your flat top. That's not what I have here right now. I'm just pointing it out, I guess. So you just apply pressure. I need two hands, so you just apply pressure to that and pop it. See if I can do this with one. Alright, so I got it started here, show you. Alright, one-handed, so it's not too difficult to remove. There we go, simple as that. So with that removed, we have a spacer, followed by little armature plate. So that's how bad our bearing is. Give that a couple of taps and see what happens. A few taps with the hammer there, you can see it's coming out. Grab a socket just a little bit smaller than the size of this hole where the seal is to. Just give it a few taps. A few taps. This piece came out. That looks okay. Once we get it all cleaned up and stuff, it'll be that much better. Now remove the seal. Like I say, the seals are not good. If you're planning on saving the seals, don't do it this way. There is a tool for removing seals. I'll have to use two hands, but anyway, we're just removing the seal. Normally you'd pry it and tap it a little bit. You're better off replacing the seals anyway. They're part of the kit, so it's just as well do it and do it right. So next we remove this bearing, a socket, and give it a few smacks. The only thing is you really got to watch out. This is the armature side, so there's a magnet here, wire and stuff, so you watch you don't hit the wire. Taps. Nothing too abusive, and you can see the bearing is moving out now of the cylinder. As expected, I gave it 2 smacks, and it did come out. All the rust and everything else in that, and the bearing itself is not in good shape, so that needs to be replaced. Alright, so on this side we had this sitting in the case. It was in from the other side, so I used my now world famous give it a few taps with a hammer, and it did come out. However, the bearing came out with it. It was separating from the bearing, but it eventually caught up and the bearing stayed in with it. So that's okay. So we'll give that a couple of taps and get the bearing off of it. So inside of this now, we just have to really give this a good clean up. And we also have to get that pinion gear out. So we still have to get the pinion shaft out. It's in its bearing. The bearing is obviously pressed in because it's not very loose. There's no way to get at it from the other side. So what I usually do in this situation is I hit the race with my welder, and a lot of times it will, I guess, expand or shrink the metal enough for it to loosen up a little bit and we can pull it out. But there's always no guarantee and you end up in a big mess. So anyway, I'm going to hit it with the welder and see what happens. So after hitting it with the welder on the race, I put a bar in the hole and I just started tapping out on it with the maul, and it started sliding out. Well, we got that out. You can see where I hit it with the welder there. I guess it was just enough to make some movement on the bearing heat-wise. Heated, expanding and shrinking. Enough to get that off. So now I'm going to hit the race again. I'm going to put this in my vise. I'm going to hit the inner race here with the welder, and then just give it a few taps with a block or a brass pin right here, and see if we can drive it out. That way we'll get that pinion out. I noticed inside here there's a bushing. I'm going to see how, if I need to take that out or not. I'm going to clean it up first and see what that's like. Just like everything else, hit it with the degreaser and brake cleaner, see what happens. There we have it. Bearing is now separated from our little pinion shaft here. So I'm going to get this cleaned up, get this housing all cleaned up, and I'll get this all cleaned up. And while I'm at it, I'm going to inspect the wiring there too, to make sure that there's no breakage in the wire. So I've started the cleanup process on the front diff. this was all full of rust and mud and corrosion stuff, and there was things caked on here, so I had to use a knife actually and clean out the grooves. A combination of brake cleaner, then I used some degreaser, and in the end when I was cleaning it up with a old toothbrush and all that here, getting the grooves all cleaned out, there's the old toothbrush and the knife here. I was getting in, cleaning out all these grooves. I used the good old WD-40, and we had the brake cleaner here, and just using some engine cleaner degreaser. And inside the channel in here, that was all full of rust and mud. I don't even know how the bearings turned. They probably didn't, which is another reason why the four-wheel drive wasn't working right. So I used a bit of 220 grit sandpaper. It's like an emery cloth, and just got in here and cleaned up the grooves. Still got to use my knife now and get the little bits along the edge. But once we get all that cleaned up, I'll soak it in some transmission fluid. Then between now and when I get the differential, all the bearings and everything all back together, so this part doesn't rust on me while I'm waiting. Alright, well, I got this cleaned up for inspection. I'm still going to clean it up a bit more, but if you remember when I took it out of the diff, you couldn't even tell what it was really. So this is like a nylon or a plastic cage that the roller bearings sit in inside the front diff gear. So these apparently are prone to breaking, but luckily this one is in fairly decent shape. So I'll give it the final cleaning, and like I say, it's nylon, so I don't have to worry about it rusting. So once I give it the final cleaning, I'll just put it aside till I'm ready to reassemble. Now we have this plate that engages the four-wheel drive system. I got it all cleaned up there. Still got a little bit to do around the little teeth there, but we'll get to that. Basically, I just wanted to inspect it, make sure it was good. There are some noticeable grooves in it. I don't know if they're supposed to be in it or not, so I'll have to check on that. See right there, the grooves. So I don't know if that's normal or if it needs to be replaced. But in any case, I got it cleaned up enough now to see, and I'll see if I need to replace it, and if I don't, I'll just clean it up some more. So here we have where the axle shafts go into, right there. That's where the CV axle goes in. So you got one this way inside the diff, and this is the other side, and in between the two of these, they go together like this. In between the two of these is a bearing, which doesn't exist. So there were some needles in there when I first took it out, but of course they all fell out. It's rusted apart, it's twisted, it's not in very good shape. So that needs to be replaced. I cleaned these up a little bit. I might use a bit of emery cloth on them, but that's where the two of these go together. That hole was filled full of rust and mud, and so was the pin, of course. So they're cleaned up enough now that they can go together, and clean them up a little bit more, put them in some oil, and let them soak. So when I originally took out the what I would call the armature plate, the little plate with all the little teeth on it for engaging the four-wheel drive, there was this clip in there that held that in place. So I got that cleaned up. That looks pretty good. And the other piece I took out, like a little spacer, just so happens to be brass. It didn't look like it when I took it out, so after I got it cleaned up, I realized it was like a brass bushing. So anyway, two of those are cleaned up. Hey, these are the roller bearings that go in that cage inside the front diff. After I got them cleaned up, all in all, they're not too bad. There was a little bit of rust on some and some pitting, so I ran emery cloth over a few here, and probably just going to do the same thing with the rest of them. Alright, so I got these little stainless steel retainers cleaned up. They're the retaining springs for the roller bearings that are in that center hub. So make sure you have all 14, because there's 14 roller bearings, and make sure you got all 14 clips. They're pretty delicate, so I sprayed them with brake cleaner and just used toothbrush on them and dried them off in a soft rag. So now I'm going to put all 14 of them in a Ziploc bag and put them with the rest of the gear so we don't lose them for when I go to reassemble. Get the pinion gear cleaned up a bit. Just need to get a little bit more rust off of it, because I don't want any impurities getting back into this when I'm done. I'm trying to get all the rust off everything, all the scaling off everything. All in all, it looks pretty good. Use a bit of emery cloth here now. And this here is where the seal goes around, the oil seal. So I'm going to clean that off good. I don't want any rough edges to let the oil seep through the seal. So I'll get that cleaned off. All in all, pretty good. Alright, so I got the preliminary cleanup all done. This here is the housing. There's a copper bushing inside here. Doesn't look too bad. There's another copper bushing inside there that also doesn't look too bad, but if I got to replace it or if it's part of a kit, I will. Everything else cleaned up pretty good. I will work on it a little bit more to make sure I got everything out of there. But basically I was cleaning it up for inspection, and it all turned out pretty well. So I got that done, as well as the other side of the case here. That's done. That's corrosion and stuff, so I just got it soaking. It's aluminum, so I'm just trying to get rid of anything loose that might be there. It's still going to look like it's been pitted or whatever. That ring in the middle, that's a magnet. So that's where the wires go into. And I inspected the wires, and there's a little bare spot there, so I'm going to put some liquid, I guess rubber liquid sealant on it to protect it when I put it all back together. But as for now, I guess I got to go out and get some new parts.